Hi everybody, this is Nick from AVLI. Today I'm going to talk about the LMS on campus. For those of you that use on campus at your school and maybe aren't familiar with it, or if you use on campus and you're not really sure of all the functionality, would like to use it better, this is going to be a quick overview. I'm going to give you what it is in the beginning. I'll compare it to a couple other LMSs that I've used next, and then at the end I'll show some of the functions and maybe some of the things that I've done with it as well. So let's get started. So on campus, first thing you get when you log on campus, which I think is really neat, is the schedule for the day. So if I go back to, let's see, one of the last days of school, this was even when we were at home for at-home learning. You can see here that you can actually take attendance for your class, and it'll tell you the exact time that your class is meeting from when until when. And then you click take attendance. It shows the roster, and then you can say who's here, who's not here, who's absent, who's tardy, and it's been easily the best way my school has dealt with absences in class. I went to the same school that I teach at now, DeSmet Jesuit. It was very, very easy for students, not me by the way, to skip class when I went there in the early 2000s. It was a paper slip that people filled out. Not everybody did it. Here, you take attendance before every class. It is a simple roll call. I actually do it as the kids walk in. So it happens before class ever even starts. And when the bell rings, you send it down, and the administration knows right away who's here, who's not here, and they can pair that up with who they thought was in school that day versus who they knew was gone. And it's just basically impossible to skip class without a teacher knowing, and it's very easy to account for all the students, including tardies. And in this case, like this red one, when I went to take attendance that day, I actually knew that one of the students wasn't going to be there because he had already called in beforehand, and so I knew sort of going into the class that student wasn't going to be there that day. And this comes in handy later with the gradebook because it'll tell you if you use on campus for your gradebook as well, which you probably should if you're going to use the LMS to begin with. When you assign something, it'll tell you who was absent either on the day that it was assigned or on the day that it was due. But it becomes really easy to check when they tell you that they weren't there the day that you assigned it, or they weren't there for this particular activity or this explanation. You can actually check that in the gradebook, and there'll be an A next to it if they were absent either when they were there. Sorry, when you assigned it or when it was due. And you can also do this with any sort of learning or behavioral disorders. If they have something like that, it will pop up on their profile, and as you create an assignment, it will tell you like this kid has a learning profile in that area or something like that, and you kind of know to help him or her with that however you see fit. Now, when you get into the actual, click on one of these classes, and let me just go to. So this is my senior AP one, and you can see across the top. This is what it would look like right when you log onto the class. You can see all of the different options that you have, and with the bulletin board, you basically are just going to put some things down here that you want up for the whole year. So this is my general in-class activity grading. I want everybody to see that. I want everyone to see what my unit plan looks like. I typically have my rubric up here. This is an early version for next year. And then when you get into topics, this is where your different unit plans and sort of blocks of information are going to be. So, this would start with in AP. I go chronologically. So we'd start with Even Plays, go to Beowulf, go to Canterbury Tales, and this kind of neatly divides all the information that you would want in different blocks, and therefore the students know where to go to get the resources that you are wanting to give them. So when you open up the Theban Plays, you can see here we've got our rubric, our essay rubric for the essay, and then all of the different key terms, poetic devices, another rubric here for podcast. These all go with, this is an ancient Greek map. These are all resources that they would need at some point during the unit, and since it can be easily arranged here, If you compare this to something like Moodle, it would be like the topic heading that you do there. But it's very simple for students to find something if they know what heading it's in. I'll provide reading questions for students in different readings that they have to do at home, so that they kind of know what the teacher's looking for, or what as a class we've decided we're going after. We'll create questions for them to kind of answer, and I keep those as well here. And then like with things like writing or whatever, I'll create a totally separate section, because this goes with any writing we do. And so I'll give them a couple sentence structures they might try. They get an extra point if they try a new sentence structure. Creative introduction and conclusion strategies. We've got some different types of college level thesis statements here, and then 3 different types of transitions. And then maybe just a brief kind of citation guidelines for quotes. Okay, but again, if I were to put that into any of these, it wouldn't quite work, and it might be confusing if you just lumped it all together, or even in the order that you deal with it in class. So it is nice to be able to separate all this stuff here. And then if you go to assignments, I think this is a pretty good feature that the LMS has as well. As you go into assignments, you can see all the assignments that you have assigned, when they're due, and then you can actually sort it according to type. So if it's essay, exam, homework, in-class activities, right? All these things, they show up this way, and then you can even check by whether it's already past due, whether it's actively assigned, or whether it will be due in the future. And then as you assign these, it creates a calendar for you and for the students when you go back out to the main page, that tells you exactly what you have due that day. Okay, so one extreme positive of OnCampus is that if the entire school is using it, and it is set up for the entire school to use, and everybody agrees to use it, excuse me, everybody is integrated into the same system, and OnCampus handles that quite well. Like I said, with the attendance, that's great. The communication back and forth between teachers, even like giving write-ups or demerits or whatever your school does is really simple here. And I think a non-threatening alternative to asking the kid to come up to your desk or something like that. It kind of separates the student from the situation and the behavior, and it marks it down without necessarily escalating the conflict at the time. And it's something that you and the student can talk about later. So if the students are all on campus, to get back to the homework, it will tell them exactly on the calendar when something's assigned and when something is due. And it will do that for all their classes. So if they have Read Allegory of the Cave due on the 23rd of August last year, they would know, okay, I'm looking at my calendar here. I have this due on the 23rd. I have this due on the 25th, and I have a paper due on the 26th. I should definitely start the paper now, or something like that. It really helps with time management, etc. And of course, as you do these assignments, if you ask for some sort of answer or something like that, as they do it, you can actually grade it in here, grade the work that they do, and then that puts it directly into the on-campus gradebook. So the on-campus gradebook is something that the parents, the teachers, and the administration can look at all times, and we'll get to that in a minute. But it is all, like I said, very well integrated and really easy, particularly if you grade something on campus, for that just to show up in the gradebook. And there are all sorts of options in the gradebook as well, with how you want to grade things, how you would like things to show up, how you want to weight different activities, etc. Okay. Over here, you have the different types of assignments and assessments that you can do. So if you click on assignment, much like Moodle or another type of online assessment, I'm sorry, LMS, you have a lot of different options that you can choose for your assignment and assessments. A few more with assessments, because these would have to do with something like quizzes or matching multiple choice. and then the discussion would be your forum or your discussion board. One area where I think on campus for me falls a little bit short is that the assignments, assessments, they have the basics, but they don't have the most innovative assignments or assessments that something like H5P or even to an extent Moodle, Canvas, and of course what you get with all the plugins and stuff on Google Classroom. Like they just don't have the breadth of that. However, it's fairly easy to sort of jury rig it to take the student to something on another website, but then that just means you have to go to that website, maybe grade it there, and then come back and put it into the box here. So it does a great job with traditional sort of responses and forums and things of that sort. But if you're starting to get into, maybe some other online applications, like this would be very difficult to use only this for online learning only, without it going to an external website. A lot of newer LMSs and ones that are open source like Moodle, it's easy to get it to be exactly what you want and to integrate much of the stuff off the site with the site itself. So there are some options here, but a lot of times I find myself linking the assignment to a separate activity off the site, whereas something like Google typically integrates that very well into the site itself. Gradebook. Okay. So this was early first semester grades here for the students, and the gradebook again, it's fairly typical of what you'll find. What I do like about the gradebook again is that it's totally integrated with the assignments that you put on here, and you don't have to do two separate grading. So you grade it on here, and then you go and grade it on or another one you might grade it on the site and then go and grade it in a separate grade book. But here, whatever you put in for the grade and whatever category you put it in, it automatically puts it into this setting. And you can see down here, as I was saying earlier, with the absences, you can see where absent when assigned. So if the student does say he or she was absent, then you know that's actually true. And if something's late and then they submit it later, an S will come up for this thing having been submitted, even though it wasn't submitted when it was due, so that you know to go back and look at it. Now, like if something says 0 but there's an S by it, you know that student has now done that. So now you need to go back and give it credit. Where I think the grade book really falls short for me is an area where most of them do, and that is that it does not deal with student choice very well at all. It is very, very difficult to rig this thing to deal with a student, say, picking to do this podcast for 15, this unit 1 homework for 35, and then skipping, say, this one or this one, which is something that I like to do in my class, where they build the grade from 0 to 100 and they pick the avenues where they want to get the points. It doesn't deal very well with that. That is a newer practice. It is a positivistic practice. And frankly, outside of something like Gradecraft, I don't really know of a website a LMS that does do very well with that. But it does have all the standard options for weight and whether you want to use percentage, how many you want to drop, whether you want to give it for extra credit, etc. So if you're just looking for a standard grade book, this would be it. Although it's not exactly my cup of tea in terms of me. I don't really give due dates, and like I said, they start with a 0 and they kind of figure out how they're going to make their way through the course by adding up different amount of points and redoing things and turning in different things to make sure that each student kind of has a different pathway through the class. Is not exactly built for that. I do know a woman that works for OnCampus, Blackbaud, and I do think that they are making strides toward that, as most of them will, most LMS will, but it's not in the works yet. And so if you are finding yourself on sort of the progressive end, you might find that the options are lacking. But as far as just a really nice fundamental LMS, I think OnCampus does a really good job, particularly in bringing the whole school together. There might be some better out there for individual classes, but as far as a whole school, this really does a great job. Thanks a lot.